Brilliant. Okay. Right. So really excited to all be here together for the next bit of time to interview the amazing, the lovely Dr. Asma Bashir for a collaboration, a partnership between our communicating science undergraduates at King's and our Dev Neuro Academy summer school champions, who have collectively come together to talk to Asma about her journey, explore her experiences, and talk about some of her amazing work. So Asma, it's my absolute pleasure to be here with you. Asma is an amazing neuroscientist and podcaster. We're going to be hearing more about that, as well as a writer. I know you're a writer as well,
gosh.
by the way. That's inside information I know about you. And also a filmmaker of late as well. I'm gonna call you a filmmaker because you've an amazing, beautiful short film as well. So I'm going to hand over to the amazing team to take over from here. But welcome everybody, and I can't wait to listen in on this. So over to you guys.
Okay, I'll start right in. So, hi Asma. I wanted to ask you, what sparked your interest in neuroscience? Was there a specific biology class or like an experience that pushed you to study neuroscience?
Yes, there was. I was an undergrad at Boston University. I was a psychology major, and I had to take a bunch of science courses, which was cool. I love science. And one of the courses that I ended up selecting was Intro to Neuroscience, just because, okay, it has overlapping things with psych, and I could possibly use it in the future. And it ended up being one of the coolest classes I'd ever taken. And I went and I spoke to the professor at some point during the semester and was like, hey, so I love this class, but I don't want to change my major. What should I do about this? And he's like, you should go to grad school. That's definitely what you should do. You're so passionate about it. He first tried to get me to be a neuro major for a while and took about 6 months to try to convince me. It didn't work because I had my own plans, but I finished up my psych degree as quickly as possible. Took a year off to just, take a breather because I'd done my undergrad fairly quickly, and jumped into the world of neuroscience through my doctoral program and studied traumatic brain injury. So it started with one class, Neuroscience 101 at BU.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So after watching your short, amazing film on your life of a PhD neuroscientist, what's like a typical day for you?
Now or then?
Now.
Oh,
now and then, actually. Why not?
Okay, we can start while I was a PhD student. It kind of depended if I was in the middle of animal experiments or if I was processing a lot of data, preparing brain sections for imaging and quantifying those images or analyzing behavioral experiments. I'd often go to conferences, which takes up a lot of time because you're prepping the abstract, you're prepping the poster or the presentation, the talk that you're going to give. And I was also one of the executive board members of the Graduate Student Association for our department for neuroscience. So that took up a lot of time too. I was organizing events and doing a lot of things within the community so that people felt like they had each other. Our cohort, after we took our classes, wasn't really as cohesive as we could have remained, and I wanted us to still remain in each other's lives and be a support to one another. So that was my life then, in addition to writing manuscripts, et cetera, et cetera. Now my life is a little bit different in that a lot of my time is spent writing, interviewing people, editing podcasts, doing a lot of just the nitty-gritty things that can be a little boring. Like this morning, I was editing a podcast transcript, which is taking a really long time because the software that I was using did a horrible job at picking up the other person's accent, which was annoying. But sometimes those kinds of things take some time. But it's a lot of fun because I get to meet a lot of people very frequently, especially during the time of COVID when meeting people was painfully difficult. So that's what my day looks like now.
Speaking of COVID, did the focus of your research work or your work change? Or
yeah.
Like, how was it affected? How did it get affected?
It changed dramatically. So I was a postdoc at the University of Edinburgh for a while, for a little bit, and the pandemic started, and I was a little bit torn in that, this is going to sound a little strange, I wasn't sure if it was worth it, if it was worth continuing to risk being in the lab, exposing myself to at that point, a disease we didn't know very much about. I was away from home. My parents were elsewhere. My brother was with my parents. We were all kind of like separated at that point in time. So I decided to kind of put a pause on that and say, God forbid something happened to me, something happened to my loved ones, something happened to my partner, and I wasn't there, it wouldn't be worth it. Like there's no paper in the world, there's no Nature paper, there's no anything that would have made it worth it for me to, get into the lab and do that experiment. So in solidarity also with people who are unable to work outside of their homes, because a lot of people are celebrating, oh, COVID's over, masks away, we're not even going to check vaccines, all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people who still have to be really cognizant of that, whether that's because they're immune compromised or they're disabled in another way. And though I am not, and I don't identify in that way, I think it would really be a little careless of me as a person to just be like, I'm good, so I'm going to go back to normal. So until I feel like the world has responded in a way that makes me comfortable and other people can partake in the world the way that it used to be, or with some semblance of normalcy, I don't think I'm going back to the lab. Oh, I wasn't expecting to talk about that today.
Wow, okay. So how would you describe the science culture, like being a Black Muslim woman? How is it? Like, how is it like?
It depends on where you are. I think there are good places and not so good places. You often find yourself representing a lot more than just you. Like you don't walk into a space and just be like, oh, I'm just Asma and you can take me as I am. I often come in and I represent a lot more than that. I represent every Black woman you've ever met, every Muslim woman you've ever met. I'm also like really short, so maybe that also influences people. Like they're like, oh, all people are like this. They're really good at making it seem like you're not just you. And that can be really burdensome at times, because if you were to make a mistake, you feel like other people after you are going to pay the price for that. And that's not really fair, but I guess you're aware it's there and you try to deal with it as best you can, while also calling attention to it in the spaces that you feel safe enough to do so. In saying, listen, your judgment of me isn't necessarily very fair because I didn't do the same thing to you. I didn't look at you and be like, oh, all people like you are like this, because that would be ridiculous and not very smart. We're supposed to be kind of smart in this space. We'll find that a lot of people are not that smart. You have your hand up, Jasmine.
No worries. Yeah, I just wanted to jump back quickly to what you were saying about at uni or in your undergrad. It was suggested that you go to grad school. Why did you choose a PhD before or instead of doing a master's first?
I actually went into my program as a master's student, but you could transition straight into the PhD program if you had good enough grades and your supervisor was fine with it. And in my case, I got the thumbs up on all fronts and I was like, okay, cool, I could do a PhD here. I liked my supervisor. She was great in making me feel like an independent researcher really early on, which some people might not have liked, but I really didn't like being helicopter supervised. I didn't like my hand being held. I really liked the fact that I was being respected as a researcher in training. And so if I had ideas, she'd listen to them. And if she didn't think it was a good idea, she would tell me why, more so as a peer than as a I'm talking down to you, which I appreciated. And because I picked up on that early on, I thought, okay, I could do a PhD here. And I did. And that's how it happened.
Oh, where did you study actually?
Starting when? I moved a lot.
Maybe after high school?
So I graduated, I did my IGCSEs in the Middle East, and then I moved to Canada. So we'll start, I guess, there, because that's where I graduated from my grade 12. And then I moved to the UK, and I was in London at Richmond. Yeah, oh, you didn't know that. And then I transferred to Boston and I finished off my undergrad there. And then I moved to Vancouver and that's where I did my PhD. And then I moved to Edinburgh and that's where I did my postdoc. And now I live in Halifax, which is on the Atlantic side of Canada.
Wow,
and there's a lot more places. I know your faces are like, oh, the list is long. It gets long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Considering your PhD work, what was your project and like what did you enjoy the most about it?
I'll start with the second question. I enjoyed the creativity. I enjoyed the not knowing what the answer was. And I I thought it was kind of cool that I was making discoveries in my own little way that were going to contribute to something that I thought was really meaningful. And now I'll talk about the work that I was doing. I was a traumatic brain injury researcher, so I was interested in understanding more about how the brain responds to impacts. Traumatic brain injuries or TBIs can happen to anyone at any time. They can happen falling down or in a motor vehicle accident, or they can happen in sport as well. So it can happen in so many different situations to people across the age spectrum. And I wanted to study something like TBI because it is so, I guess everyone can get it. It's not a disease of one group of people. It's not super old people. It's not the super affluent who get this disease. No, like anybody can be on the receiving end of a traumatic brain injury. Specifically, I was using mice to understand the neuropathological consequences of traumatic brain injury. And we wanted to create a model. My phone is ringing. Oh, my mom's calling. That's fun. She forgot that I had this to do today. we were interested in the neuropathological consequences. So looking at how the cells in the brain respond to the actual impact in this model that we had created in the lab. We were interested in the behavioral consequences of traumatic brain injury. So we wanted to know if we could create the memory deficits that we see in human beings in our mouse model. We wanted to see if we could also see the gambling tendencies that we see in human beings who've had a concussion or repeated concussions and traumatic brain injuries in our mouse model as well. And the reason why we wanted to build such a strong model of brain injury is because the better your model, the better you can develop therapeutics later on. And so by the time I left, I'd say I was quite content with the model that we had built in its ability to recreate and recapitulate so many different aspects of human brain injury in this mouse. And we also expanded into rats and ferrets. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I know you're involved in like so many different roles. Like, how do you manage your time?
A good calendar. Yeah, I try to make sure that I write everything down. I am not one of those people who can keep thousands of emails unread in my inbox. So I try to keep on top of things. I'll dedicate maybe an hour or two just to emails. And even then, things sometimes slip through. There have been times that Lee and I have kind of missed each other. We're like, I need to respond to this. Gosh, I didn't respond to this. So I'll write it in my calendar to do this week. I have to respond. And I just try to do that. I also just like to make sure I work with people who hold me accountable. If I haven't responded to you, don't feel bad about emailing me and saying like, hey, I'm just flagging this for your response. And I'll do the same. And I think having that relationship with the people in my circle does help a lot.
Oh, okay, thank you. When you were invited to Dev Neuroscience like last year, I remember you saying that you want to make scientific like research more accessible to people, not just like scientists. Like, how do you do that?
I first started by doing local things in Vancouver. So we have a local science center called Science World, where I don't know how it first started, but we built a relationship with them, the Graduate Student Association, with Science World at large, so that we could put on like little mini meet and greets and little exhibits so that we could interact with people across the age range as well. So we did Teen Tuesdays quite a few times, which was a lot of fun and a little daunting because teenagers, you never know what you're gonna expect. I feel like I'm so old, even though I'm not that old, but you just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm like young people anymore. And I just like, I want y'all to think I'm cool. But anyway, we won't digress too much. It started there, and I liked seeing how people responded when I was talking about my work, because I think my work is really cool. And I've always felt that way. And I was really excited about it. And I never thought other people would be that excited about it until I saw their response. And I got, whoa, like I thought this is the kind of feedback that I need to make sure that I continue to talk about my work. And I feel like you can do SciComm wherever you go. You don't have to do it in formal settings like Science World, or we did a couple of things with the Space Center as well. You could do SciComm with your Uber driver. Like there's the number of times that I've been in a car and they'd be like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a neuroscientist. Oh, really? Tell me about it. I am ready. The spiel is ready. I'm going to tell you, although half the time I won't mention the animal work just because you never know how that aspect is going to be received. But you can talk about TBI, you can talk about American football concussions, you can talk about car accidents. And my lab also studied Alzheimer's disease. So I became fairly well versed in neurodegeneration as well. So if oftentimes people will tell you that story as well, like, oh yeah, my grandmother, oh yeah, I had an uncle and this is what they went through. And I'm like, yeah, this is what we think is happening. We don't have all the answers, but there are a lot of researchers trying really hard to understand what's afflicting your loved ones. So take solace in that.
That's so cool. So it's like normal conversations.
I feel like psychom can be normal conversations. Yeah. Ashley, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about kind of where or how maybe your psychoms has changed since you're not working in the lab right now. Not that it would be completely different, but just have you kind of noticed that you talk about things differently or your perspective has changed? Yeah.
I'm not sure my perspective has changed, but I think I do share the mic a lot more, which is great for me. I don't often like the spotlight. And so the more I can kind of say like, oh, you tell me about your stuff. Like I want to hear about you and your life and your work. I think that tends to work in my favor right now. Whereas before, psychom, at least at the very beginning, was more of something I was doing to put on my CV because we were encouraged to do it. And then I realized, wait, I could just do this because I like it and because it's valuable and because people have a right to this knowledge, especially in countries and spaces where a lot of us are taxpayer funded. Like the grant that was funding my project in particular and my salary was directly from the Canadian government. And so it would be weird for me to say, like, thanks for the money, but I'm not even going to tell you about this work. No, you deserve to know. You put effort and money into this work. And even if you didn't, I still feel like the general public is deserving of this knowledge. I think now I just kind of go, you tell me about your stuff too. And I share the mic there.
Cool.
After listening to like one of your podcasts, it was, I think it was Editing for with Dr. Joel Babdor.
Yeah.
It was so interesting. And I just wanted to know, how do you like connect with scientists from like all around the world to get involved in interviewing them on their experiences?
Some of it is just happenstance. A lot of times we're part of the same circles on Twitter. So someone will tell you about someone, they tell you about someone and be like, oh, I think they'd be really cool. Sometimes people reach out to me and say, I'd like to tell my own story, which is very nice. And other times I'm just kind of, a fan of these people and I go, hey, I think you're really cool and I want to talk to you. For Joel, I don't even remember how he and I he started Black in Immuno, which I think was celebrating their annual event. And I was just like, hey, do you want me to do a little profile about you and your team? And that turned into, let's sit down and have an interview and you can just tell me about you. And that's how Il était une fois became a thing.
Wow, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, Laia or Leia, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, no, that's
Laia.
So I was gonna kind of ask about, because you were saying obviously there's value in science communication in the fact that like it's publicly funded and obviously everybody has a right to that. But do you think that the perception of the role of science communication varies from country to country, as you've spoken to so many people all around the world? Do you think that it's different? That the perception of like kind of science and the value of science communication is also different?
Yes, but I'm not sure what I've thought of is the thing that I want to say, so I'm going to word it differently. I think communities that have created science to be somewhat of an upper echelon thing see science communication as not that valuable. Whereas science for community's sake, and I won't name any names and I won't name any regions, but when people look at science as this is a thing we do together, this is for us, this is how we help each other, this is how we better our society, better our environment, etc. They tend to just see science communication as like it's supposed to be there. Why wouldn't it be there? That's the whole point. You're supposed to do it to share it. Why else would you do science? So I think there's some subtleties in different cultures.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I know that you said that you don't want to say like what countries, but I was just wondering if you've kind of like experienced this as you've worked in many different countries. Does this come from your actual work that you've done like directly in science, or has it been more that you've kind of talked to people from many different regions and you've acquired this knowledge that way?
I think it's both. I think in firsthand experience in the lab, you also come across different people from different backgrounds, and you can just sense their feelings about a particular thing, like science communication, or working in the lab until 11 p.m. regularly. There's just a difference in the way people express themselves or their work cultures and that kind of thing. And later on, when I was talking to people through the podcast, I would say there are things that you also pick up there. But I think also just generally in the lab space, the PI might even have a culture that they cultivate in the lab where they say, I expect this of you. And you're like, this is so weird. That's not healthy. But that's just the way they think it should be. And it's really hard to fight against that. Yeah. Ray, if you have a question.
Yeah. Hi. When you said you did experiments in the lab when you did your undergraduate and
yes.
all the way through to your PhD, did you get a lot of freedom? So could you do like a variety of experiments? Could you do
as an undergrad or as a PhD student?
Both.
Both. Oh.
Did it change as you went up, or?
Yes, it definitely changed. As an undergrad, it was very much more of a do this and we'll see what happens, and we can develop the story as you get your data. And then as a PhD student, it was more so, what are your ideas? What do you think could come out of your thought process, or what are your hypotheses? Or sometimes our conversations would also be, okay, go away for a week and read some papers and come back and let's talk about what could happen if we applied this model in these mice and looked at these particular time points and looked at these outcomes, how would it be? So I think it becomes more and more collaborative as you get, I wouldn't say older, just more senior in your career.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Before, when you mentioned kind of mice, you were like, it's not something that I kind of express when I'm like talking, like just having regular conversations about science and kind of have that science communication. Why do you think that is? And like, do you think, just why do you think that is, that the perception of the public of kind of ethics in science is so, I mean, ethics as is just a controversial topic, but why do you think it might be especially so in science?
I mean, if I put my non-science hat on and someone were to describe the work that I did for my PhD, I think I'd be a little frightened too. I think I'd be like, you use animals that are bred purely for the reason of science and they have to endure certain situations. Obviously, if I don't have the explanation of all of the ethics that we go through and making sure that these animals are as comfortable as they can be given the situations that they're in, making sure that they're happy and healthy and have, I guess, thriving lives if they can have them, if you're, having animals up until adulthood, etc. I think I can be compassionate to how someone who is wary of it might feel, because it is a little, it is something that I had to think about too as I entered the space, because the work that I did as an undergrad was with people. The experiment that I was co-running was an EEG experiment with 1-year-old people, like little humans. So that one, nothing happens to them. They come, they get treats, and they're on their mom's lap, and they wear like the worst part of it is them wearing an EEG cap. That's like the horrific experience that they go through. Other than that, they're completely fine. If I were to describe the traumatic brain injury experiments that we were doing, it's a little different. It's a little bit more stuff. And so I'm cognizant of the fact that someone might not want to hear about that if they're driving me to a hotel, the context and it just might not be the best conversation to have. If they are interested and they know that, some people have an understanding that when we test vaccines, we have to test them in animals before they get into human beings. If you know that and you're comfortable with that, then I might say, yeah, and we also use animals in other spaces within biology and other spheres of science. But if they don't, then I'm a little trepidatious because I'm aware it's not a nice topic to talk about all the time. Yeah. Yes.
How did you know that research was for you? Because myself and some others who are also doing the communicating science module, we just have a great interest in science, but not so much in conducting research. So how did you know that you wanted to take the research?
I don't think anyone really does. As much as people say like, oh yeah, I knew I loved research. No, you didn't. You tried it and you liked it. And I think that's so true for everything in life. You actually don't know if you're going to like it. You don't know if you're going to like the university courses that you're selecting. You don't know if you're going to like the professor. If you check, I don't know if you guys do this anymore, but like if you go on Rate My Professor and you see that other people have not liked that professor, you don't actually know if you're going to like them or not. So sometimes what I would do is read through the little ratings and be like, okay, can I work with this person? You do it the course for, I don't know, a day or two and go, I like them, I don't, I switch out. But you don't 100% know, even if someone gives you all of the advice in the world. You kind of have to try it out for yourself if you're willing to take that risk. Give it a go, do it for a semester. If you hate it, never do it again, and it'll be the recollection that you have of this is what happened when I did research. Or it might have been just a bad lab. So you might do it for a semester and not like it, but realize it was because of the environment that had been cultivated there and the PI that was there or the postdocs who was not there or something like that. Yeah, I don't have a very good answer for that because I don't think anybody really knows.
So even though you didn't know at first, at what point did you know that it was right for you? Like once you did start and found out what it was truly like, what was the point where you knew it was 100%? Like this is what I do?
I don't think it's ever 100% either. Yeah, I don't know if I ever knew 100%. I just knew that I liked it for the time being. I'm probably the worst person to give advice because I was raised to kind of just do what makes you happy. And so long as you can kind of put a roof over your head and you're comfortable and you're fulfilled and you're not hurting people, do that thing. And I can thank my mother for that because she didn't push me into any spaces that I didn't want to be in. And I kind of sympathize with people who might say, you know, my parents really want me to be a doctor. My parents want me to do this. And I'm like, yeah, it sucks. But unfortunately, I don't have firsthand experience with that. And so the research thing is kind of like that. I don't think I'm ever 100% on anything. I just like it till I don't. And then I go, all right, let's switch out and do something else. And then I will do that until I don't like it anymore. And I think that's probably why I've moved so much, because I've done that a bunch of times where I'm like, yo, London, this is it. This is where I want to be. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, switch gears. Boston, this is it. This is where I want to be. Okay, this is cool. And I leave before I hate it. And that way, if I do ever want to go back, the option's there. Like that was a plan that me and my partner had for a bit. We're like, you know what? One day we're going back to London. He's never been, but I've sold it to him. Basically, I'm quite proud of that. Like we are going, we're living in London at some point. And so I didn't get to a point where I just found it absolutely deplorable and like, oh my God, it sucks and rent's really high and blah, blah, blah. It was good. I loved it. And that works for me. So I think this research thing also is kind of in the same boat where I didn't hate it yet. And I might go back and I might do a research postdoc, but I also love teaching. And that was one of the reasons why I even went to grad school, to be able to have the option, if I ever wanted to create my own courses. And I was a teaching assistant and I did that as an undergrad. I did that because I love interacting with students and making sure that they feel like they have someone who has their back. But will I do that forever? I don't think so. I think I might do it for a couple of years. And while I do it, I'll be the best lecturer, teacher, professor, whatever that I can be until I don't think I can do it at 100% or 90% or 80%, whatever my max is, and go from there. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry if it doesn't.
No, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Does anyone else have any immediate questions? Because I can do another one. Yeah. Okay, so can you tell us about your undergrad experience and maybe another reason why you chose to go straight with like neuro? Like, was there anything that psychology didn't give you?
Think- I like people a lot, but I'm also an introvert. And I assumed that if I did psychology, that could be a great starting point for any other career that I wanted. If I wanted to go into business with an undergrad in psychology, I could do that. If I wanted to potentially go off and do medicine, I could customize my degree to be more pre-med and go into medicine. If I wanted to, I don't know, anything that marketing, I could have done that with psychology. So it was a nice starting point. I thought about going into being a therapist just because I know I'm good at listening half the time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe people would disagree with you, but, or disagree with me saying that, but I knew that that was an option. And that's why I did psychology, because it was just so open. I could do whatever I wanted. Why I picked neuro, I just thought it was really cool. And I thought there was so much left to be discovered. A lot with psychology is rectifying past information. Like, this is what we believe from Freud, and this is what we believed, and we might be wrong, and this is what we thought autism was, and we might be wrong, so we might have to change it. But you're working with past information to try and rectify it, which can be a lot of work. With neuroscience, a lot of people just kind of go, we don't know, like we're starting from zero and we're building up. So I just saw a difference in the structure. One was starting from up and working our way down and breaking down our understanding. The other one was there's so many holes in our understanding. And that was a beautiful thing because everyone was kind of off to the races with all these amazing techniques to find out what the answers to these questions really were. Yes.
Great answer.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
Jasmine, Ashley, we were like kind of talking about some questions today that we might ask. And from, I believe, one of your podcasts, you were kind of saying that you just kind of had to start a podcast, that it just felt very natural. But what was it that compelled you to take that step? And what have you learned from it?
I like hearing people's stories. I like knowing where people come from and what they've been through, and good or bad. It doesn't have to be a sad story all the time. I like knowing who people's parents were and how they treated. Oh, I should have been a therapist. But I like knowing those kinds of things because it tells me so much about why you are who you are today and why you think the way that you do and why you're passionate about the things that you're passionate about. That's why I think it just felt so natural, because it didn't really even feel like work. I just, connect up my mic and I say, okay, let's just chat for an hour and see what comes up and see what feels natural to you. What was your second question?
And what have you learned from it?
Oh. I've learned that, I don't know if this is a good thing, but anyway, I've learned that science can be really unwelcoming to a lot of people. I think I got lucky in a lot of the spaces that I was in, a lot of the time. Like I had moments where I thought, like, why are you assuming things about me, whatever those things might be. But people still have some really horrific experiences, sometimes that we talk about off the record. So we might finish up the episode and then like, oh, that was really great. By the way, I didn't want to mention that my PI has been doing this to me. Or, it's been really tough for me to deal with XYZ. And it's really sad. It breaks your heart to realize that science and academia, I guess STEM more generally, can oftentimes be a place where just people are miserable and they see the goal at the end of the road and they go, I want my PhD, I want my master's, I want this assistant professorship, I want to become a dean, whatever. And it's really tough to see that and reconcile the fact that they're trying to do really good things, but they have to deal with a lot of horrible things to get there.
Continuing on from that, like, what do you think is the best thing that people can do to make those spaces more welcoming, whether or not they're interested in going to that field or they're higher up in that field, what people do.
I think I said this last year, but I don't know if I fleshed it out fully. I think whatever power you have, use it. So if you happen to be, men don't get interrupted as much, for instance. So if you happen to be in a boardroom or in a conference or whatever, and a woman has made a point, or someone who's femme presenting has made a point and she was ignored, and a man says the exact same thing, someone should be able to call that person out and say, she said that, and you're kind of taking credit for someone else's work. Obviously, if you don't have that much power, saying that is going to make things really difficult for you in your career. So you have to leverage the fact that, okay, as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Muslim woman, I might not be able to say that and be heard, but so-and-so who is not like me can say that. I shouldn't have to ask you to say that. You should be able to sense the fact that what happened was wrong and stand up and say, yeah, you can't do that. For me, my power a lot of the times was in the fact that I am eloquent. I can say things and people will listen to me. And also I kind of gained seniority as I was in my lab for longer and longer. So when things were happening with the undergrads, I won't go into too much detail, but some things were happening that I was really uncomfortable with. And I nipped it in the bud as soon as I saw it, because there was just a lot of like man-women interactions that I didn't like and power imbalances there. And because I was a senior PhD student at the time, I felt like I could say something. But if I was a first year and I saw this, I'd feel like, don't mess with this. Like it's their thing. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to mess up my thing, whatever I have going on at this point in time. But by the time you're a third year or fourth year student, no one's going to take away your projects, or no one's going to diminish you depending on the circumstance. In that particular circumstance, I had power. In other circumstances, I might not have had power. So use your power and advocate for others wherever you do have power.
You mentioned before, there's definitely like a cultural difference in a whole host of things. So how do you uphold your own boundaries in research and manage the expectations that other people have?
I think you have to be comfortable with the idea that people are not necessarily going to agree with the way you do things. So as I've grown older, I won't say I was like this all the time, but as I've grown older, especially when I was doing my postdoc and I was an upper year grad student, I just didn't work weekends. I did not think that that was something that I should have to do. So that was a boundary that I tried to establish. That can be really difficult because some people are like, well, you're a scientist. If you sign up for this, it's a long-term commitment. You shouldn't be complaining about something like this. And because that was what I had been told early on, that's how I behaved as an early year graduate student. When I was first and second year, I was basically working 6 or 7 days a week because I thought I had to. But as I kind of got older, and I don't know, maybe it's also just, being tired of saying yes to everything, you get really good at saying no. You're going, yeah, I don't want to do that, or that's not feasible. That was something that I respected my PI for. If she said, can you get this done in a week? And I went, yeah, if I don't sleep, she'd be like, okay, fine. So 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, that works better. If you have someone who you can have that kind of relationship with, I think that's a great thing, because it helps you establish boundaries too. If someone else is not constantly pushing down your boundaries, you feel like the walls can stay up and you can have a work-life balance that is healthy for you. But if you feel like you're constantly being combative, like, no, I don't want to do that, or that's not possible, or the paper's not going to be done by that date, you feel like you're constantly being worn down, even if you win in those arguments. Even if the person at the end of the day says, okay, fine, do it in 2 weeks, or fine, okay, I'll be patient. Even if they do that, you feel like, God, why did I have to fight so much for it? So, yeah.
So when it comes to the workload, particularly in your PhD, how did you handle the stress?
The stress. I guess having good friends, having a good partner helped too. I got married in grad school. I don't know if people should do that, but I did. And it worked out really nicely. He was a grad student too, and we came in the same cohort. So I feel like we both really understood what the other was going through at any given point in time. Having someone that you feel like you can also rely on an academic level. I can read through his stuff and he can read through mine and say, yeah, that's not a good way to present your argument, and vice versa. That helps. My vessel and the way that I kind of let things out was through poetry, which I don't know if it's kind of corny, but I loved writing. I loved performing spoken word. That was something that I started doing in my second year, I would say. I kind of got invited to this spoken word event, and they're like, oh, you know, you don't even have to perform. You could just listen in the audience. I was like, okay, cool. So I listened and I was like, okay, I really want to perform one day. So I did, and it ended up being the thing that I pursued outside of work. I hid it for a period of time because, you know, work culture makes it seem like you're not allowed to have outside interests. But it was something that I could just, I could vent and I could say, this person was kind of rude, and I didn't have to name them, but it just felt good to get it off my chest. So yeah, stress is something I'm not really good at handling, which is why I think I was so quick to find something that would make things better. But I think people who are better at stress will hold it in for like 5 years and be like, okay, now I'm going to go on a retreat. I was never going to wait 5 years. I was the kind of person who went, yeah, no, this sucks now, and I'm going to handle this now. To kind of end off with a little anecdote, that was actually something that happened to create the podcast as well, where in March of 2019 in New Zealand, something really horrible happened. It affected Muslims. I didn't like it. I sent an email to my lab, and my PI included, of course, saying, yeah, I'm not coming in next week. See you guys later. And they were really receptive to that, which was wonderful, because some people would have been like, what are you doing? You're being a flake. But I think I had established who I was with respect to my work ethic and what I was capable of doing, and the fact that I wasn't a slacker. When I showed up, I was showing up as the best version of myself, and my presentations were always good. I was always prepared. All that stuff did not stop being true because I was stepping away from the lab. So I wasn't going to wait till a point where I broke down in the lab and then I was like falling down on the floor like, oh yeah, I'm really sad about what happened. No, I'm going to let you know before it actually gets me to that point. And again, that might just be getting older, because at that point I was like 24 or something. I just said, yeah. When you get older, I think Lee will tell you this too. You don't tolerate people's stuff anymore. And you go, no, I'm going to do the thing that makes me happy. And that if I come as myself, the best version of me, you're going to appreciate it more too. So I'm not just doing it for me. I'm not being selfish. I'm also doing so you don't have to deal with my wrath, because that's not going to be very nice either. No one wants that.
Oh, you know what? Sorry to come in here, guys, but I'm just, you know, Asma, I can't imagine you having anything other than your absolute lovely self, and your version of wrath, I'm sure is not. You know, but you're totally right about, you know, and I think what you've just talked about there, and actually everything that you've been talking about, I think is really so valuable, because it is about having that confidence to know where your boundaries are. And I think if you have that confidence in whatever it is that you're doing, then I think people they do sort of, they understand it pretty quickly. But if you don't put your boundaries out there sometimes, then you know that people don't really know where they are, so they may ask more things of you. And you know, sometimes I think you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have to put my boundaries out there. That's the other thing sometimes that's a bit frustrating. But you know what you're saying there. But you know what, Asma, as well, all of the things that you've talked about and your podcast and everything that you're sharing all the time is creating and supporting that space to give people those confidences to be able to, because even if you don't realize it, like they're listening and they're thinking, actually, you know, there's so many different stories and journeys, and you have given that platform, and you know, that is amazing achievement on your part.
Thank you. That's really nice.
It's true, you know. I don't, you know, it's good to be told these things, I think, sometimes, isn't it, when you're reflecting on, you know, the impact that you have. We all have impacts on everyone all the time that we're dealing with. You've got great reach, girl. You've got
Oh, thank you. Or does anyone have any last questions before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah.
Make it a good one.
No, I
All
have
of
a
these
lot.
have been great, by the way.
I
You
might
do? Okay.
do. No, because like, for example, you were saying kind of as you're getting older and you're kind of gaining that confidence and setting those boundaries, like, did you ever feel different, like that it was perceived differently when you were setting those boundaries as a woman? And for example, in the space of science especially, we can see that there's a lot of like women that are undergrads, but very little of us actually get to being PIs and get to like the higher spheres of STEM. Do you think there's just like societal, or do you think there's like a particular reason why that is?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a number of reasons. I think women as the primary caregivers of children definitely puts us at a deficit. And even if you choose not to have children, you still have almost like the stigma of womanhood on you. Where when I was going to postdoc interviews, it was kind of, not said directly, but so what are your plans with respect to a family? And I'm just like, I don't know, like, get off my uterus. Like, why do you care? I didn't understand why that was relevant, because as my partner was also looking for work, I don't think he ever got the question, even though like, we both got married at the same time. It wasn't like there was anything drastically different other than the fact like I would carry a child potentially and he would not. But I think that's a big part of it. I think there's a lot of times we make women compete with each other and then we make men compete with everybody. So women, we end up fighting each other on like the smallest of things, but not because we want to, but because they make it seem like they only have so many spots for us. Like, okay, well, I have this professor position that is going to be filled by a woman. Now you guys fight for it. But there are 30 other positions for professors that, just the best candidates will win. And that's usually code for people who fit the metrics that we think are the most important. And you have to think about whether or not a female grad student got the first authorship that she deserved, but because she didn't say anything, maybe the guy was first, or it was co-first and he happened to be like first, or how many last authorships he got. And then all of a sudden you can say, oh, I'm being unbiased. And we just look at the number of first author publications you have. The system's broken anyway. Like by that point, you're already at a deficit. So yeah, there are a lot of things that women have to go up against. I just mentioned too, but there are a lot that like not being included on emails. That's a big one, where they're thinking about, oh, we're going to put together this grant, this big project that's going to yield, or that hopefully we're going to get millions of pounds of funding or millions of dollars of funding. And she just doesn't get included, even though she's an expert in the field. So when they get the grant, she's not included. They do the work. They get a massive publication. She's applying for tenure. She's not qualified because of one thing. So yeah, kind of sucks. Jihain, you also had a question really, really quickly.
I just wanted to say, like, what's your like biggest accomplishment that you're like the most proud of? Yeah, because you've done so many things. I want to know.
Oh gosh, this is gonna sound corny, but it is true. I like that I'm still the same person I was 10 years ago. I like that I haven't really been affected by the hoopla of, try to get what are called CNS papers. So Cell, Nature, Science. I don't care. I really genuinely do not care. I want to do good in this world. When I die, my papers are not going to like keep me warm in my grave. I'm just going to try to be the best person that I can be. And hopefully if people remember me, I don't need them to, but if they do, I hope it's positive. I hope they go, she was a good person when I was with her. She listened to me. She made me feel like I was a worthy human being. She made me feel like no matter what I do in life, she'll be there to support me. And I don't have to know you intimately for you to feel that way. And I think that's the great thing about the podcast, where when I do champion people who are doing things that might be unorthodox, they have one person who goes, yeah, she's cool with that. Even though I'm not an important person in their life, I'm just one more person for them to understand that whatever they choose to do is valuable because it's good, like full stop, good for the world. and nothing else. No, it doesn't make a lot of money. It doesn't have to do all the other things that we deem successful. It's just good. So I like that I haven't changed that much. I'm still 17-year-old me who just wants to do cool things and have fun and talk to people and make people feel good about themselves.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. I was just trying to work out your age there, Asma.
Oh,
Surely
gosh.
17 isn't 10 years ago.
It is.
Oh, bless you. Well, listen, guys, and we could carry on chatting away for hours.
Yes.
I have a load more questions here that I haven't had time to ask you. But I just want to thank you, Asma, and well done to everyone who's asked questions, by the way. Thank you so much, guys. Some really lovely, insightful takes on things. And Asma, thank you so much for your honest, amazing answers, as always, and for sharing your time and journey and thoughts on all of this stuff with us today. I'm just going to stop the recording button.